On that bookshelf we had the family's collected books. There were 17 books altogether. It was Eliasson, Jack London's collected, and so forth. I read every book before 10 years old. I read everything, in fact, John. I read what was on the toilet paper. I read what was on the chocolate, förpackning. And the Harvard all the oatmeals. I read what's on it, or I sort of collected words. Then my father came home. He was a labor union man. He had been to a folkhögskola, People's High School, or People's College. And he came home with a prize that he had won in a contest of something. And it was a lexicon, an encyclopedia, from A to Ö. That letter doesn't exist in English. A to Ö, A to Z. And I started to read this at age 10. And I don't think I read the whole book, but I'll tell you a third at least. 3,200 pages. Small print, thin pages. This book is now in the primary place in my library in Stockholm, outside Stockholm. It's the finest book in the world for me. And I read that book in the one-room apartment. And I remember, if you live in one room with 4 people, you need to light down, to turn off the lights at the same time. And I remember stealing reading time by having a torchlight, reading under the... What made it feel under the... What? Under my blanket. Thank you. Senior moment, it's called. And I remember even the encyclopedia falling over my nose, almost breaking it, and I broke the page of the map about the Balkans, I remember. This is still, I can prove it when you get back and see it in Stockholm. I say this because I consider the words, the language, the words particularly, as tools, verktyg, in a toolbox. And you need to have the right tool for the right problem. If you use the wrong tool for the wrong problem, or right problem, whatever, you don't succeed. You need to have the exact tool for the exact problem. And you remember yourself how much you regret if you say something which has a fantastic amount of synonyms. You need to have 5 or 6 synonyms in a negotiation, because suddenly the other guy on the other side, the Iranian or Iraqi or Armenian or Azeri would say, listen, I would never accept this word. This will not fly in my parliament and with my prime minister. I will not be able to work if this is your basis of discussions. Wow. Well, then it's important to open the toolbox, bring out your 3 or 5 synonyms, and then you change, put his favorite word in the center, and then you build the argument along this new word, and you do it in front of him. You don't let him or her, mostly it's him in my situation, let him have time to have a pause, a break, because then he will call his foreign ministry or whatever, and they will close down and say, no, we will insist, and they might even make it worse. So you have to do it right when you sit there. And that you can do only if you have the strong toolbox, the big toolbox available from the beginning. My mentor, whom I never met, but who was my sort of ideal diplomat, was of course Dag Hammarskjöld. I gave a lecture, by the way, about Dag Hammarskjöld, which I don't recommend it for reading, but if you're interested in the subject, I gave the Dag Hammarskjöld lecture at Uppsala. It's another university in Sweden, you know. At the 50th marking of his death. He died on the 18th of September, 1961, and I spoke 18th of September, exactly 5 years later. It's being printed by the Dag Hammarskjöld Foundation now, and it's available at the Dag Hammarskjöld Foundation. Dag Hammarskjöld was extremely stern and very, very strong about the word. I had always the UN Charter in my pocket. And I lost the blue cover, so it's really so well read. And here I have the Millennium Development Goals, the 8, by the way, they're here. We have a poem by Lars Forssell, which is good also about words. And then I have Dag Hammarskjöld's works about, it's in his, markings. It's called vägmärken in Swedish. Markings is in fact a bad translation. It should be waymarks or road marks. But anyway, here it says, I have it only in Swedish, so I'll do it in Swedish. Okay, I'll do it in Swedish, and because it's his original words. I can't translate his original words. This is what he says about the word. Respekt för ordet är ett första krav i den disciplin genom vilken en människa kan fostras till mognad, intellektuellt, emotionellt och moraliskt. Respekt för ordet, dess bruk med strängaste omsorg och i omutlig inre samhällskärlek är också för samhället och släktet ett villkor för växt. Att missbruka ordet, and here he gets very serious, att missbruka ordet, det är att visa förakt för människan. Det är att underminera broarna och förgifta källorna. Så för det oss bakåt på människoblivandets långa väg. Pretty tough language. I read that to the young attachés and the newly employed officials at the foreign ministry every year as cabinet secretary or director general of the ministry. Also at foreign ministry for a short time I had that privilege. And they got a bit, scared. Not scared, but they thought probably twice before they wrote something about another personal situation without really careful scrutiny of the word. The easiest quote by Shakespeare is, I think it's Polonius in Hamlet, who says, "Words, words, words," as though words are nothing worth. For once I part company with William Shakespeare. I claim that words are action. Ord är handling. And I would even give you an example now how words can save lives. It was a negotiation that I conducted in the UN, for the UN, in Sudan in 1993. It was a horrible civil war. By the way, it brought about 2 million people's death. And it has resulted in what is now South Sudan and Sudan, of course. But at that time, a horrible civil war raged in Sudan. I was Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. I was sent by the UN Secretary General to Khartoum because we had received serious warning that an area in Khartoum, in Sudan, was very, very much affected by civil war around a special area, now South Sudan. And it was also impossible to leave that area, not only because of the raging civil war, but also because of landmines. There were landmines planted all around this area. And Norwegian missionaries and humanitarian organizations sent an urgent cable to us in New York and said, if you don't come in and save this area, 50 to 60,000 people will die from starvation. And I was sent off immediately, having this job, humanitarian operations. And I met President Bashir in 1993, the same man who is leading the North now, by the way, he's still there. And it turned out after only a day of negotiation that we would face an impossible task because we had come there to demand or request or negotiate a ceasefire, a local ceasefire, ett lokalt eldupphör. And it turned out that President Bashir said very categorically, I will never accept a ceasefire with these terrorists, quotation mark, because he considered them terrorists, because he didn't want to give them legitimacy by signing an agreement about ceasefire. It would enhance their status. And then he added something which made a strong impression on me. I should have thought about it before I left New York, but I left in a hurry with my 4 colleagues. And he said, by the way, if you want to have a ceasefire, a local ceasefire, you need observers. You need military observers. Where are you going to get them from? And I said to myself, I can't get military observers in 3 weeks. And we have 3 weeks to work to get this done. Otherwise, we will see a mass starvation. So I went to the hotel in the evening, and I said to my colleagues, I know when I can succeed, and I know when I cannot. I don't have time to sit 3 days and try to convince him to sign an agreement with the SPLM, the movement in the south, which by now are the leaders of South Sudan. And he's right, I said to my colleagues. We need observers, and I can't get military observers in 3 weeks. So I said to my friends, my colleagues, let's brainstorm. Let's find a new concept. Let's find a new word. And we started to think and talk. And then actually the youngest delegate, he was duly promoted afterwards, said, we should look for a humanitarian concept. You are Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs. Put on your... Somebody else said, well, why don't you put on your Mother Teresa hat? So we started to talk about zone of tranquility. No, I said, let's do sentimental. Let's have something more precise. And then we ended up with a term which was then coined for the first time in the UN system. We wanted to negotiate humanitarian corridors. A humanitarian corridor. Humanitarian corridor, in this case, 200 kilometers wide, 60 long, 60 wide. We would save everyone inside this corridor, no matter whether it was rebel-controlled or government-controlled villages. And we wouldn't need an agreement between the two. We would only need a commitment to the UN. We would put a time expiration on it to be renewed after a month or 3 months. And it worked. The government said that yes, after 1 day we had this agreement by President Bashir to a humanitarian corridor into this area. Then I went to Juba in the south and met one of the rebel leaders, Damakol. He agreed, and then I met the main leader, the leading personality was John Garang. And he was in Nairobi, I saw him. He was very happy to sign an agreement with the UN and to save his people, of course. And 9 days later, the planes flew into this area in southern Sudan from Kenya in an operation called Lifeline Sudan. And we saved practically all these people. We had food, medicine, water, tablets, even some water drilling equipment. And in 9 days we have proven the point, which I want to also prove to you, that words, words, words. Dear William Shakespeare, don't underestimate it. Words are action, and words can save lives. If we had insisted on negotiating a ceasefire, we would have had to go back. Not make it. We changed the word, and it changed the whole situation. Okay. So we moved to the other categories, and as I said, considerably briefer. Next, timing. We usually don't sufficiently analyze the importance of logical sequence of arguments. When you argue something, when you negotiate and mediate, you should have a pretty disciplined order in which the arguments come. It's like going up the stairs, like this, you know? Normal height, all three. Can you imagine my problem getting up here if I had a 1 meter third step?